You ever hear a story so terrifying it's impossible to forget? That's what happened to me during my time at Bang Kwang Prison in Bangkok. They call it the Bangkok Hilton, but trust me, there's nothing luxurious about it, especially if you're unlucky enough to end up in cell 14. That's where I was. The guards never talked about it, but you could see it in their eyes. They avoided cell 14 like the plague. The inmates whispered about it, stories of a guard who had been brutally murdered in that very cell decades ago. They said his name was Kayet, and he wasn't just any guard. He was notorious for being cruel. He didn't just enforce the rules, he reveled in breaking people. But one night an inmate finally snapped. They say Keat didn't die quick. His death was slow, agonizing. He bled out in the corner of the cell, his screams echoing through the block. And according to the legend, his spirit never left. At first, I didn't believe any of it. Ghosts? Come on, I thought the inmates were just messing with me. But then, strange things started happening. It was my first night in the cell. I was lying on the thin, stained mattress, staring up at the ceiling, trying to ignore the suffocating heat. That's when I heard it. The sound of boots. Heavy, deliberate footsteps echoing in the corridor. I figured it was the night shift guard making his rounds, but something was off. The footsteps didn't move past my cell. They stopped right outside. I sat up, peering through the bars, but there was no one there. Just silence. I laid back down, telling myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks on me. But then I felt it, an icy chill crawling up my spine, like someone was standing right next to me. The next few nights, things got worse. The lights in the cell would flicker, and my belongings would move. One night, I woke up to find my cup of water sitting in the middle of the floor, spinning slowly as if some unseen hand had placed it there. And the footsteps, they kept coming, always stopping outside my cell. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I shouted, "Who's there? Show yourself!" Big mistake. The room went dead silent, and then I heard a voice, a low, guttural whisper that chilled me to the bone.
"You don't belong here."
He stepped toward me, dragging something across the floor. A baton covered in blood. I backed into the bars, screaming for the guards, but no one came. He raised the baton, and just before it came down on me, he vanished, gone, like he was never there. The next morning, I told the other inmates what I'd seen. They just nodded, like it was no surprise. One of them, an old-timer named Somchai, leaned in close and whispered,
"Keat doesn't like new inmates. You have to give him something, an offering, something to appease him."
Desperate, I took the advice. I left a small piece of bread and a cigarette in the corner of the cell that night. For the first time in weeks, I slept without incident. But it didn't last. Keat wasn't satisfied. The final straw came one night when I woke up to find myself unable to move. I was pinned to the bed, my chest heavy like something was sitting on me. And there he was, Keat's face inches from mine, his breath cold and foul. His voice echoed in my head.
"Get out."
The next morning, I begged the warden to move me. I didn't care about the ridicule or the consequences. To my surprise, he agreed. Maybe he knew something too. I was transferred to a different block, and the hauntings stopped. But I'll never forget Keat's face, or the way his hatred followed me in that cell. Some say Keat is still there, waiting for his next victim. So if you ever find yourself in Bang Kwang Prison, pray you don't end up in cell 14, because once Keat chooses you, he never lets go.